Everyone on set already knew what was going to happen in the script. They knew that something horrifying was about to burst out of John Hurt's chest, which is why his shocked line, "Oh my God," felt so real. At the time, Hollywood had very clear ideas about who could lead a movie like this. The studio originally wanted Meryl Streep, but executives argued that no one would pay to watch a woman fight monsters. Then Sigourney Weaver stepped into the room and quietly changed movie history forever. She went on to make 4 Alien films, but after that, she walked away from the franchise that made her a global star. Now, at the age of 75, she has finally started talking about the disturbing truths behind the scenes, including failed clone storylines, FBI involvement, studio pressure, and the dark reason she refused millions of dollars to return. Sigourney Weaver was born on October 8, 1949, with the name Susan Alexandra Weaver. Fame surrounded her from the start. Her father, Pat Weaver, was one of the most powerful figures in early television and helped create The Today Show and The Tonight Show, programs that completely changed American TV. Her mother, Elizabeth Inglis, was also an actress who appeared in the 1935 film The 39 Steps before stepping away from acting to raise a family. Sigourney's extended family was just as impressive. Her uncle, Doodles Weaver, was a well-known comedian, and her godfather was Steve Allen, the first host of The Tonight Show. From the outside, her life looked privileged and glamorous, but she did not feel that way at all. Growing up, Sigourney often felt invisible. Her parents were busy with demanding careers, and she spent much of her childhood feeling ignored. She once described herself as a lonely little girl wandering around a large house with no one to talk to. Instead of relying on her family's fame, she wanted to build something on her own. Acting did not even seem like a serious option at first. She enrolled at Stanford University to study English literature, believing that acting was not a practical or respectable path. Her college life was anything but ordinary. She lived in a treehouse with her boyfriend, played the flute, and sometimes dressed up in elf costumes just for fun. She did perform in school plays, including A Streetcar Named Desire, but she still thought becoming an actress was a silly dream. Everything changed after she graduated and traveled to Israel, where she worked on a farm. Being away from home made her realize how much she missed stories, characters, and performance. That was the moment she decided to apply to the Yale School of Drama. Yale turned out to be brutal. She was surrounded by incredibly talented classmates, including Meryl Streep, who seemed to land all the best roles. While others were cast as young romantic leads, Sigourney was often assigned parts as old women, which felt humiliating for someone in her early 20s. Some professors openly doubted her abilities. One even told her directly that she had no talent and should quit. Instead of breaking her, those words fueled her determination to prove them wrong. Years earlier, she had already made one bold decision that helped shape her identity. At the age of 14, she changed her name. She discovered the name Sigourney in The Great Gatsby and felt it suited her better than Susan. By 6th grade, she was already 5 feet 11 inches tall, and her height made her feel awkward and out of place. Other kids teased her, calling her names like Giant Spider. Changing her name gave her a sense of control and confidence. Later, that unusual name worked in her favor in Hollywood. Some casting directors assumed Sigourney was a man's name and were surprised when she walked into the room, which made her instantly memorable. Things slowly improved at Yale when she met fellow student Christopher Durang. Like her, he felt like an outsider, and together they started creating strange, experimental theater. In one play called Titanic in 1976, Sigourney played a woman who kept live animals inside her body. It was bizarre and unsettling, but it showed her ability to combine odd humor with deep emotion. They went on to create a wildly unconventional play that mocked war and capitalism. Sigourney played a sex worker smashing champagne bottles while singing about money. Critics were shocked, confused, and often angry, but the work caught the attention of influential people in theater. For her final Yale performance, instead of delivering a traditional serious monologue, she performed a piece about a woman seducing a refrigerator. The professors failed her for it, but Durang secretly shared the script with agents. that rebellious choice led directly to her first off-Broadway role. Before Alien, she was deeply involved in New York's experimental theater scene, pushing boundaries and ignoring expectations. Most critics hated those plays, but they developed a cult following. Her first film role was almost invisible. In Annie Hall in 1977, she appeared on screen for about 6 seconds with no dialogue, standing in a trench coat near Woody Allen and Diane Keaton. She later joked that she earned $50 and spent it on a sandwich. It was embarrassing, but it helped her career in an unexpected way. Casting director Juliet Taylor remembered her face and later suggested her for Alien. Because no one expected the silent woman from Annie Hall to become a sci-fi hero, her performance in Alien felt even more shocking. Fans eventually started playing a game called Where's Sigourney, trying to spot her tiny appearance in Annie Hall. Alien almost never happened the way we know it. Early versions of the script did not specify the characters' genders, but male pronouns were often used. No one imagined the lead role as a woman. When director Ridley Scott and studio executive Alan Ladd Jr. decided to make Ripley female, it was considered a huge risk. At 29, Sigourney Weaver was still largely unknown. Meryl Streep and Glenn Close were considered before her. When she got the role, she was paid just $35,000, while co-star John Hurt earned $250,000. The studio did not believe a female action hero would sell tickets. Ridley Scott fought for her. He had her train with former Marines so she would look confident handling machinery and weapons. The gamble paid off. Audiences were stunned when the male captain died early and Ripley emerged as the true survivor. She was not weak or helpless. She was smart, calm under pressure, and determined to live. Her performance in Aliens earned her an Oscar nomination in 1987, something almost unheard of for a science fiction film at the time. The Academy usually rewarded dramas and romances, not movies with aliens and explosions. Ripley was unlike any other nominated character. She was a warrior, a leader, and a protector. She ultimately lost to Marlee Matlin, who made history as the first deaf actor to win an Oscar. Many believe Sigourney should have won, but her nomination alone changed how Hollywood viewed women in action roles. In 1989, she made history again by winning 2 Golden Globes in one night, one for Gorillas in the Mist and one for Working Girl. No actor had ever done that before. In Gorillas in the Mist, she transformed herself into real-life scientist Dian Fossey, spending months studying her behavior and even living among gorillas. The shoot was physically brutal, and she became seriously ill during filming but refused to use a stunt double. In Working Girl, she played a manipulative corporate executive so convincingly that people joked she must have been inspired by real bosses they knew. Despite her success, she resisted being trapped in one type of role. She turned down major projects like Total Recall and The Silence of the Lambs because she did not want to be typecast. Instead, she chose emotionally challenging roles that pushed her in new directions. She played a quiet, unhappy housewife in The Ice Storm and a deeply traumatized woman confronting her torturer in Death and the Maiden, a role so intense the director called it emotional surgery. Even when she was not physically on screen, her voice work in WALL-E proved her ability to captivate audiences. Science fiction kept pulling her back, though. She agreed to return for Alien 3, but only under strict conditions. She wanted Ripley's story to matter, not just exist for another sequel. She insisted that if other major characters were killed, Ripley should die too, so the story would have meaning. What followed was one of the most chaotic productions in Hollywood history. Scripts were written, rewritten, and thrown away. Entire sets were built and then abandoned. Directors fought with executives daily. The original concept, filled with religious symbolism and psychological horror, was scrapped at the last minute. The studio interference was constant. David Fincher, a young director at the time, struggled to maintain any creative control. Sigourney faced her own battles, including painful allergic reactions from makeup glue and arguments over shaving her head. The studio wanted her to wear a wig to look attractive. She refused, saying Ripley was not meant to be desirable, only to survive. The experience left her exhausted and disillusioned. By the end of it all, she had had enough. She had given everything to the character and watched the studio strip away meaning and risk in favor of profit. That was the real reason she walked away. No amount of money could convince her to return to a franchise that no longer respected what Ripley stood for. The whole experience left her feeling drained and emotionally worn down. She felt defeated in a way she had never felt before, and it opened her eyes to how Hollywood often treated women, especially women who spoke up. Male executives dismissed her ideas and labeled her hysterical simply because she wanted creative input. Some crew members clearly struggled with taking direction from a woman, even though she was the lead and a producer. At one point, the situation became so discouraging that she seriously considered quitting acting altogether. Despite all of this, she never blamed David Fincher. In fact, she defended him repeatedly, saying the film was buried under studio interference and that she could still see the strong, thoughtful movie he was trying to make underneath all the compromises. Fincher himself wanted nothing to do with the film once it was released. He later called it a nightmare and famously said that no one hated Alien 3 more than he did. When Fox released a longer cut of the film in 2003 that restored about 30 minutes of deleted footage, Fincher refused to participate or even put his name on it. The scene he disliked most was Ripley's death. Originally, Ripley was supposed to sacrifice herself by falling into molten lead, a moment that felt final and symbolic. At the last minute, the studio forced a change, adding the alien bursting from her chest as she fell. Fincher thought it was pointless and stupid, a cheap attempt to copy the ending of Terminator 2. Sigourney Weaver, however, had mixed feelings. She knew the movie was deeply flawed, but she also believed it was bold. She respected Fincher for refusing to play it safe. Killing Ripley was a huge risk, but she felt it made the character's grief and suffering feel more real. Over time, the film developed a cult following, and some fans began to appreciate its darker themes, including corporate cruelty and control over bodies. Weaver believes the film deserved far more understanding than it received at the time. In 1997, Sigourney Weaver returned to the franchise one last time in Alien Resurrection, but this time she was not playing the original Ripley. Instead, she portrayed Ripley 8, a clone created through disturbing scientific experiments. This version of Ripley was no longer fully human. Her DNA had been mixed with that of the xenomorphs, giving her unnatural strength, faster reflexes, acidic blood, and a strange connection to the aliens. Weaver showed this difference through her physical performance. She did not move like a normal person. She stalked, crouched, stared intensely, and carried herself like a predator. In one scene, she even growled that she was the monster's mother. Despite her power, Ripley 8 was also deeply lost. One of the most disturbing scenes in the film showed her discovering a room filled with failed clones of herself. These versions were twisted, deformed, and suffering. One of them begged her to kill it. In that moment, she realized she was not just a copy of the original Ripley. She was something new and deeply tragic. Critics largely rejected the film, calling it strange and unfocused, but Weaver defended it. She believed Ripley had evolved and that this new version deserved to be explored. One of the most famous moments in Alien Resurrection was completely real and unplanned. There was a scene where Ripley had to throw a basketball over her shoulder without looking and make the shot. The director planned to fake it with visual effects, but Weaver refused. She trained for weeks with an NBA coach, practicing the shot over and over. On the day of filming, the crew expected to spend hours trying to get it right. Instead, she made the shot on the very first take. Everyone on set was stunned. Ron Perlman, who was in the scene, broke character and shouted in shock. His reaction was not scripted, so they had to cut the scene quickly. To this day, people talk about it as one of the most unbelievable moments in film history. Weaver later joked that in a movie filled with special effects, the one real moment was the thing everyone remembered. When Alien Resurrection was released, it received a lot of criticism, but over time some viewers began to appreciate it for how strange and fearless it was. The movie included bizarre ideas, such as a human-alien hybrid with haunting eyes, a scientist who treated the aliens like pets, and Weaver fully embracing the madness. She delivered outrageous lines and committed completely, even licking blood off Winona Ryder's face in one scene. She later said she enjoyed the weirdness and respected the director's unusual vision. Some scenes, like the underwater chase where aliens hunted the crew through flooded corridors, were genuinely terrifying. Others, such as the hybrid alien being sucked into space through a tiny hole, were widely mocked for poor effects. Weaver admitted the film had problems but said she did not regret making it. It was not Alien as people knew it, but it was something different. After that, she made sure Ripley's story would not be turned into a shallow action franchise. That is why she completely refused to appear in Alien vs. Predator in 2004. She thought the idea was ridiculous and once compared it to making Jaws fight Godzilla. She had insisted on Ripley's death in Alien 3 because she did not want the character dragged back just for money. When Fox went ahead with Alien vs. Predator, she was furious. She felt the studio had destroyed Ripley's sacrifice for a quick, mindless movie. She even blamed the project for ruining Ridley Scott's plans for a more thoughtful continuation of the Alien story. Over the years, she never changed her stance. She wanted Ripley remembered as a true science fiction hero, not a toy in an endless franchise. Even though she stepped away from the films, she found a meaningful way to return to the character through video games. In 2014, she voiced Ripley in Alien: Isolation, a game focused on Ripley's daughter, Amanda. The developers invited her to record dialogue for special missions that recreated scenes from the original film. She even reunited with the original cast to make the experience authentic. Unlike later movies, the game focused on fear, tension, and survival rather than non-stop action. Weaver loved it and said this was the sequel Alien 3 should have been. Fans were surprised she agreed to participate after rejecting so many Alien projects, but for her, this was different. Video games allowed Ripley to exist without Hollywood politics and studio pressure. At the age of 61, Sigourney Weaver surprised everyone again by playing a 14-year-old Nausicaa girl named Kiri in Avatar: The Way of Water. There was no artificial intelligence trickery involved in her performance. James Cameron wanted her to move, react, and behave like a real teenager. To prepare, she ran, climbed, and deliberately made herself awkward. She reread her teenage diaries and worked with acting coaches to reconnect with that stage of life. For years, fans speculated about Kiri's mysterious origins, and Weaver added her own creative touches to the role. One emotional scene where Kiri bonds with underwater creatures was not even in the script, but Cameron loved it and kept it. At first, people laughed at the idea of a woman in her 60s playing a teenager, but she proved them wrong. The visual effects team made her look younger, but everything else came from her performance. She later appeared as a villain in The Defenders, but not a typical one. Her character, Alexandra Reed, was not interested in ruling the world. She was simply trying to survive after living for centuries by stealing organs. Weaver pushed for the character to feel intelligent and quietly powerful rather than magical. Her most chilling scene involved calmly poisoning someone's tea, a moment that felt more like Shakespeare than a superhero show. Marvel wanted to keep her character alive longer, but Weaver insisted on her death. Later emails revealed that studio executives regretted not using her more. In 2013, she returned to Broadway after a 20-year break in the play Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike. Her performance was chaotic, fearless, and unpredictable. During one show, she tripped so badly she broke a co-star's rib. She did all her own physical comedy, even when costumes malfunctioned or wigs caused problems. Once, she got tangled in a wig net on stage and played it off. Another time, she went off script for 7 minutes, ranting about old soap operas, and the playwright loved it so much that he added it to the show. She even insisted on using real vodka on stage, nearly breaking the budget. Her wildest moment came when she secretly performed a matinee while sick with COVID-19, later saying she simply channeled her character's madness and pushed through. Galaxy Quest allowed Weaver to poke fun at her science fiction legacy. She played Gwen DeMarco, a character who mocked the shallow roles women were often given in space movies. A scene where Gwen complains about the ship's ridiculous death traps was Weaver's idea, inspired by her frustration with plot holes in Alien 3. She also improvised a line while running from a monster that nearly earned the film an R rating. Behind the scenes, the screenwriter fed her insults through an earpiece to make her angrier on screen. Her costume became a running joke because she kept tearing it on purpose to mock impractical sci-fi outfits. Even the famous chant in the film came from an old comedy sketch related to one of her Broadway failures. In Ghostbusters: Afterlife, her brief cameo carried more meaning than most people realized. Her scene hinted that her character, Dana Barrett, had secretly helped fund the Ghostbusters' return. Cut dialogue even suggested she helped rebuild equipment. Weaver changed lines to suggest Dana might have psychic abilities and refused aging makeup, saying her character had earned every wrinkle. Originally, she was meant to fight a villain, but Weaver rejected the idea. She believed Dana should be the calm center in the chaos. Sigourney Weaver has been married to Jim Simpson for over 40 years, an incredible rarity in Hollywood. They met in 1983 at a theater festival where he was bartending. She was dating someone else at the time, but later invited him to a party. He stayed to help clean up, and that simple moment led to their first date. They married in 1984 and later had a daughter, Charlotte, who is non-binary and works as a professor focusing on artificial intelligence and digital storytelling. Weaver struggled to balance motherhood and her career, especially while filming Avatar as her daughter applied to colleges. Despite her fame, she chose a quiet life in New York, avoiding Hollywood drama. Throughout her life, Weaver has spoken out about causes she believes in. She works with the American Heart Association, supports reproductive rights, fights for environmental protection, and has spent decades supporting gorilla conservation. She has risked arrest during climate protests and opened her home to activists. For her, activism is not a trend or a performance. It is simply part of who she is.